everybody. I'd like to call to order the Quality of Life and Infrastructure Committee. This is February 27th, 2023. Roll call. I am Councilman Risberger. I'm here. Councilman Davies. Here. Councilman Carson. Here. And I'm hoping Councilman Harrington will be joining us soon. So did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? Any questions, concerns? All right, we have, as usual, a full agenda here. There's one item I want to go over really quick. First, I don't think it'll take us that long. We had talked about the street naming policy, developing one, and I know there's a group that is waiting for us to have this done. Right. And so what I did is I went online actually during that last meeting and came up with some examples of other street naming policies other cities have used, and picked and chose between the two of what was the same and what seemed to look good to put in there and was something we would want, and so I created a starting point for us for a discussion, which we don't necessarily have to have today. The three areas in here that we definitely would want to consider changing that are only temporary in here are the application fee, which both of these other cities that I looked at had an application fee of $50, and the cost of the signage was to be covered by whichever group was looking to put the honorary sign in, but not to exceed, I think one was $200, the other one was set $300. And lastly, the color that we want to do for the honorary signs. I don't think anybody would want us to have like a constant changing of different colors for these signs. Having some kind of symmetry would be nice. I don't know what color we would want to do, but maybe we want to think about it, and we can include that in the recommendation, I suppose.
Weren't we leaning towards the blue because the brown was historic, right? National historical.
I didn't remember if we decided
Remember we kind
on
of talked
that or
about that, right? Something about the blue.
See, it was red or blue is what we kind of decided because the brown had the historical significance. I don't think the red did, but either one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it happens to be in here, the white legend with blue background, so I could leave that. But if you guys want to take this and pick it apart, see what you want to add, anything that should be taken out, and we can come back and put it on the agenda for the next meeting. That'd be great.
Sounds good. I'll also go with this number 2, natural person. I'm not sure what a natural person is, but
Yeah, I just had the question about that too, Mark. Is it just, Dave, what were you thinking with it?
I think it's so you don't have like, you don't have an honorary street name called, Captain Crunch Street.
Correct. Yeah.
So
No, I just want to know the purpose of the two numbers. You had number 1 and then a number 1.
it's just me copying and pasting,
Oh, okay.
and then I realized after the fact that the numbers were all over the place, but I figured it doesn't matter at this point as long as we have something to look at, and then we can clean it up and before we send it to Dave.
sounds good.
So
And so out of the other two examples, Dave, that you read, was that common, the no living individual?
yes, yep. So
And you'll forward this in electronic copy so we can make some comments.
I can do that. Yeah.
That'd be good.
Just to be clear though, I mean, I'm not set on anything that's in here, but I use that as an example because that's what everybody else seemed to be saying, no living person. I'm not quite sure, like I'm always trying to look at, like, why is it that, like what could happen if we removed that? And I'm not exactly sure what the answer is yet. Maybe I'll come up with it, maybe I won't. So, but if you guys are set against, if you guys want to remove that, I mean, state your case.
I like the
Okay
fact
with
that it
that
has
too.
to be a living person because we don't want Captain Crunch, but
Right. A natural person, you mean?
natural person, sorry.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure about the living or non-living.
Yeah, I don't, there must be a reason behind it. I just don't know what it is that they use, but I didn't want to jump at just taking it out since everybody else had used it.
I mean, I look at Muller Plaza.
Well, number one, it's not a street. How many streets have we named for?
I think this is all in territory, isn't it?
The honorary street name, yeah, outside of the parks,
They
yes.
go on the side of the parks,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, that was named in, when he was still,
Yeah, Dave Brenner was on it, right? Yeah, he was alive.
well, I mean, if everybody agrees to remove it, I mean, I'm not set on it, so.
And this is a very good foundation, so thank you for the work.
Yeah, can we, have some time to look this over and then maybe
Yeah.
have our next meeting, dedicate really to kind of wordsmithing or concept mapping some of these particular ideas, and then I think we
Yeah.
can be pretty close to have
Absolutely.
something to give to Dave.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to the Wilbur Park Master Plan. And, I'm assuming everybody had a chance to take a look at that. I think I've read it a couple times now. Personnel, where did I put it? I'm just gonna look at the digital copy. Okay. There were two different, there's a priority list. Maybe I was looking at the surveys. No, that's not it. Discussion.
Lou, when was this survey done?
When was it done? January through March, wasn't it?
Of 22?
Of '22, yes.
Okay, we have a project's priority list, and we have a master plan design. I'm assuming we don't need to look at the priority list at this point. I'm assuming the priority list was woven back into the master plan design sheet, the 3-page.
Yeah, I think that
Plan discussion?
we did the priority list just to give you an idea of what we felt
Yeah,
were most important. That, I'm sorry if it's confusing.
it may just be me that's confused, Lou, don't
No,
worry
well,
about it.
there's a lot to this, and
Yeah, I mean, I like everything that was put in here. I don't think there's anything that I disagreed with that didn't need to be done. There's some things I think need to be done like immediately. But of course, it's all funding dependent. The only question I had was Wilbur's upper level, with a basketball court. We're talking about putting a fence around the basketball court?
yes, it was just a suggestion made. In fact, I made it. And the reason being, I remember 100 years ago when my children were little, and we frequently went to Wilbur's playground, and frequently had to grab the kids up because adults were chasing basketballs that got loose over into there. And I think it's part of the allure of the basketball court now, because it's fenced in, they don't have to chase their ball, it stays in the meted area.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a deal breaker right now. I think we could basically do the basketball court there, leave no fence, and just play it by ear and see if it's down the road we wanna
Yeah,
consider it.
fence down the road.
Or maybe 3 years from now, we say we don't need it. It was just something that popped into my head when we were talking about the basketball court.
Are we still talking about redoing that court this spring?
Yes.
This year, yeah, it's the county ARPA funding project.
Do you guys have any questions? Don't let me stop you.
Yep, okay, I was waiting for you.
No, go ahead,
Okay.
go ahead.
So Lou, I was just curious, I saw and I didn't count the number of times, but I saw disc golf mentioned a number of times in the report, and some people making some strong arguments for it, but yet I didn't see it reflected here. I'm sorry, survey versus here. What was the thinking of the group in terms of why disc golf wasn't gonna be part of kind of the master plan?
We did talk extensively about disc golf. We don't feel that Wilbur Park is a place for it. Number one, I think it would bring huge crowds to the park. I think that that would be disruptive to the neighborhood. I don't think there's a room for disc golf. There's also a brand-new disc golf facility out near out in the town near the,
The
Yes.
FNF airport?
and I don't see it used a lot, or we don't see it used a lot. In fact, Trevor Huntsman, who's on the commission, mentioned that he's there and it's not heavily used. Yes, a lot of people did mention it. I don't think Wilbur Park, I think it's something we could consider down the road. I don't think Wilbur Park is the place for it. My opinion, and the commission agreed.
Okay,
That's the reason why it's not included. Yes, it wasn't mentioned a lot in the survey.
right, it just seems that it's a low-cost,
Mhm.
high, kind of high-value type of project that we could be able to do rather easily, so that's why I was a little surprised that it wasn't in the recommendations or amongst the recommendations.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot.
Okay.
So out of the master plan, what hasn't been financed through your budget? Are you ready to go on all these items? I mean, your budget was made for this year, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, on the priority list, things that we have to do at the pool, I think all of those are in there, correct, Chris?
That's correct.
With the exception, I don't think we can do I think the natural gas heating unit was not approved, was not put in there. And I think that that's, if you're looking at the survey, that's something people have continuously complained about, the temperature of the pool. It could possibly extend the season. It would certainly extend the enjoyment of people using the facility, especially those poor children taking swimming lessons in the morning.
Those kids are
And their
blue in the morning.
lips are blue and everything else, so
Yeah.
we have natural gas there. It seems like a good investment to me, but it's something we just couldn't do.
What price point are we looking at to do that?
Do you know, Chris?
I have not
I don't know.
done estimates on that.
Okay.
So another couple questions I had was, one, I saw that there's a new tennis court, hitting wall there next to courts 4 and 5, so I was wondering how you're thinking about that, and I just was concerned because it, at least in the diagram, we have it kind of overlaps, or is really close to the entryway, or entrance road into, the park. And then what was the thinking there, rather than back to where its original location, where it was taken down?
The
10,
thinking,
12
the,
years ago?
the thinking is simple. Oneonta High School and Hartwick uses those facilities for competitions. You need 6 competitive courts. It's much easier when your 6 competitive courts are all together. Right now, the way they are, they're very separated. The 6th competition court is up at the other end.
Right,
So that's part of it, and we thought if we had a 6th court there, we could also build a tennis hitting wall, which is also heavily requested in the survey,
right.
and from those teams. That's the idea behind that. I don't think that that's something that has to happen next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what was the thinking in terms of, why not just a tennis wall, a hitting wall back where it originally was? In that, it's still paved area there, why?
Because we had another idea for a pavilion, some kind of cover there
Okay,
in that particular area. There's no cover there for spectators or people that want to enjoy people playing tennis or whatever. We also need restrooms there. The 2 restrooms that are there are not good, to say the least.
Yep.
And when Wilbur Park pool is closed, those are the only 2 restrooms on that level.
right.
and so to just keep flushing those thoughts out, Lou, on the new tennis court and the tennis hitting wall, why did you decide to go towards the road instead of to the opposite side where you're suggesting of replacing you are suggesting replacing
I think
the
that's where we
concession
saw
stand?
room. I think it could be at either end. I am not an engineer and nobody is on the commission. We just were looking at options. It could be in one end or the other.
Don't question if it was on the end where the road is, I mean, would it be fenced in so we don't have to worry about tennis balls going into the road?
Yes?
I do know the tennis hitting wall has been missed since it, we had to
Yes.
tear the other one down. We originally had plans, if you remember, to
Yeah.
rebuild it, I think the same year. But a lot of things happened that
Sure.
made it not happen. Do we have any other questions for either of you guys?
Well, I'm just trying to understand the timeline here, so if I'm looking at this correctly, so in the 2023, with your project priority list, every A through D was approved and financed, but then how do the rest of the projects shake out for 2024 and 25, 26?
We don't have a timeline for any of this. Just like when the master plan was created for Neowa.
Mhm.
The master plan was created, and it was several years later that we even got a timeline to start doing projects. If I'm remembering right. I don't know, we don't have a timeline for this. Only the first few that were our necessity for Wilbur Pool.
So Greg, what do you need from us for your office to kind of flush these out and be able to actually schedule them and have them financed?
Well, like we said, with the New York Master Plan, it was originally last updated in 2013. Nothing had been done on that for a number of years, decade plus, until we started doing this project. The pickleball courts was actually something that was added, we did the dog park, the other things, the paving, trails, but a lot of that is funded through ARPA funds. The reason I think that these projects weren't funded before is they weren't deemed a priority by the council, they weren't funded in the capital plan. So the bigger projects, if there's a bigger expense that can't be absorbed, like the smaller pool improvements that are part of our annual operating budget, if it's a bigger thing, that might be something that, based on how the council ultimately prioritizes these, we can consider a capital plan paid for by the city, or parks reserves, or if there happens to be a grant funding available, or other funding source. I think it's similar to the NEWA plan, it's something we have to kind of consider.
We didn't have
as go. I don't
timelines.
think we can commit to any particular timeline to complete everything, because it really depends on funding. So that's ultimately what we need from the council, is what is the priority, and then we can advise how we might get to.
Besides things that are necessary for the pool, the biggest thing, I see the biggest thing we need is new restrooms at the large pavilion. That's a priority, that should be a priority.
What do you mean by new? I mean, those can't be refurbished, they have to be completely rebuilt?
I think they should be completely rebuilt. I mean, like I said, I'm not an engineer, but they are just
They're in extremely poor condition.
bad condition. And if there was any way we could build them so that there's two entrances. So if I'm a community member and I've rented the large pavilion, I'm using those restrooms on the inside, there should be options for people coming from the outside so they don't have to walk through my event to get into the restroom,
Right.
things like that. Those are things that need to be considered.
Okay.
If we had a lot of money, I'd love to see concrete restrooms placed there, prefab, already made concrete restrooms, they'd be wonderful. But they're also very expensive.
Yeah, I haven't been in those restrooms in probably close to 20 years, so, and they weren't great then, so.
And part of the reason they're as nice as they are now, which isn't nice, is that they were beat up by someone and practically destroyed with a sledgehammer. So,
Okay.
anyway,
So Greg, kind of looking at the want list, or are we transcribing that over to the able to do list? It's hard for me to try and say yes to any of this if we don't have the financing. I'd like to say yes to it all, but obviously that's not gonna happen.
Wait, can I jump in? Len, I'm looking at this as similar to the Neola Park Master Plan. We didn't have any timelines on any of that. It was essentially a wish list of what we wanted the park to look like. And in that case, we hired somebody to do the work, and there was a big map of what the park would eventually look like. And the thought was, the council looked at it, they approved of the overall plan. Whether or not we could fund it or not was another story. And then when we voted to accept the plan, the next job is then to see over time what we were able to actually pick apart and pay for. Sometimes it might be some grant funding. I mean, the one thing, the splash pad that's gonna be on there forever, but it's not necessarily something that we can just pay for. I'm looking at that as the same thing here. This is definitely more of a needs list. But I think the council should, unless there's something drastically, something we really disagree with being on here that we think we definitely don't need, what I would suggest is we vote to accept this as a council, and then we go forward with seeing, okay, what can we pick off here and put in the budget for next year? And that would have to be a conversation between the council and Greg and Lou, and try to get a little bit done every year. But I think trying to make a list now, a timeline of what we can pay for now, and base that on approving this, it's not like, we're not making a budget.
So I look at this, David, as the PNR Commission puts a lot of time and effort into this. They've gone over this survey that was obviously done from Lou January to March of '22. They poured through it, short of what Mark found, and that was a legitimate question to ask. Yeah, I have no reason not to accept the master plan as presented. I was just moving ahead thinking financially, how are we gonna make any of this realistic, because we've had such a conversation about the basketball courts. I'd like to get that taken care of in '23, but yet it's not financed for '23, right?
Basketball court is. Are
Yes.
done this year through the county also funding?
It's just the fencing we don't know about then?
So the county ARPA funding, depending how, as far as it stretches, it's $50,000 we have available. With resurface the court, replace the hoops, paint the lines, potentially do the fence if there's enough. But we'd also included on a request to them, which they approved, improvements to the playground, shade structures, and installation of the ADA accessible path and ADA equipment. And then also repurposing the current lower basketball courts. I think that still will be finalized exactly what we do there. The suggestion from Lou and the Parks and Rec Commission was to turn them into pickleball courts. We also talked about it being a family play space of some sort. In our discussions, we think it might make more sense if we're going to paint some hopscotch lines to do that on the basketball court in Upper Wilbur, right next to the playground, where there's already a lot of
Children.
young children
Kids.
playing and that sort of activity going on. Maybe concentrate that together, and then have the conflict of pickleball and tennis, and kids and hopscotch. The basketball court in Upper Wilbur is intended to be rented out for the basketball. We use for competitive play as much as kids doing that.
Another thing we're gonna look at, I don't know that we'll be able to afford to do it, but we would like to. I would like us to do a stone dust path connecting the upper level with the lower level and along the creek bed in Wilbur Park. We went with stone dust because it keeps the more natural impact as opposed to paving in Wilbur Park. It would keep people off the roadways, that's a biggie. It would make the beauty of Wilbur Park, which is that riverbed, more accessible to more people. I don't know that we're gonna be able to afford to do that, but that's on my list, my wish list for this year.
Would that be handicap accessible?
We thought so, right?
Yeah, we'd have to be 5 foot wide.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
We need more of that.
yeah.
And Lou, I couldn't tell, does that stone path at the northern part of the park join up with that lower bridge there? There's that kind of swampy area there.
Yes, yes, that's the idea, I
Right,
think.
okay,
Yeah, that's what I'm envisioning. We don't really have anything mapped out, but,
Yeah, we really need to get something through there. That's been, I've heard a couple.
and
concerns
it
about
also
that.
something that's designated also to keep some of our bikers out of the upper level gardens. because a lot of times they're scooting through there because there's no designated path really, other than if you see an old mud path or whatever. So that would help with that.
So that, you're saying that that Stone Dust Trail would actually connect the lower and the upper
Yes.
around Applebaugh?
Yes,
Because the problem is there's a trail that kind of terminates right near Applebaugh on the easternmost side of the park. And then the next nearest trail is down below, so that's why people go to Applebaugh,
right,
being one of those, by the way.
Right.
I'll allow myself.
right.
So there would be something that would connect.
We're hoping that's what we can do.
And what they've been doing is going kind of north of Applebaugh, so they're not
Right.
going directly through that. I think that's been helpful. There's been some signs marking that.
Right.
Okay.
Hi, Scott. Do you have any questions about the parks plan?
No, I'll have to listen to what was being said.
I'll put it out there and we'll just tell you, I think the plan looks good. I do have reservations about the sixth court there. I just feel like that's a tremendous cost. Of course, that's something down the road, but that's my only concern. But everything else I think would be great. The walking path, the bathrooms, as Lou points out, are vital, especially if people are using those particular areas. But my concern is just the cost of the new courts would be conservative.
Yeah. Well, I think, I agree. I think you have a valid point. I think having 6 competitive courts together also leaves 2 courts available for recreational play. You don't have people playing recreational tennis next to competitive courts going on. So you're eliminating that problem by putting 6 courts there and having 2 courts strictly for recreational use when those teams are competing.
Right.
So, I mean, there's no way that I'm gonna have 6 competitive courts going next to somebody just playing around playing tennis. So thus, those groups rent all the courts even when they don't need court 7
Right.
for that reason. So, just so, that doesn't mean it makes
No,
it
I
feasible.
appreciate the background, that's just, looking at cost and
Sure.
impact, that's
Understand,
fine.
that's what you have to do, of course.
Does anybody have any last questions for Lou at this point? Okay. So my suggestion at this point is, unless we have any objection, is to vote to move this forward for approval or acceptance by the council. So moved. Do we have a second? Scott? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the work you guys have done.
Commission.
I'm gonna jump down to Deer Management Task Force because it's only gonna be a very short discussion here. Where we left this is, Mr. Merzig had some questions about the contents of the recommendations, some minor concerns, but I had followed up with him this weekend, to see exactly what we need to do at this point. Do we need to move it to council to approve and then, or to accept the recommendations and then work on all the other stuff that needs to be potentially changed in it? Or do we work on that first before we accept it? He suggested that we contact NYMER and send this to them for their recommendations of any immediate changes before we vote to accept the recommendations. So I'm gonna talk to the city clerk when we're done with the meeting, and I'll get contact information and we'll make that happen.
But out of all that plan, the city attorney didn't say anything kind of jumping out?
There were some other things, I thought I forwarded his email to everybody. It was more along the lines of when the plan is implemented and let's say we implemented the plan and there's somebody that's out there that's doing a bait and shoot or trapper and shoot, whatever you wanna call it, who they're answering to at the moment, and there's some other liability issues that have to be worked out between the city And if it's not on city property, if it's on private property, that's something else to take into account since it's our program that we're implementing. So I think the first step is to go to NYMER. Hopefully some of those questions are gonna be answered by them right away. So, okay. Let's go back up to park service fees. And I'm hoping that, Greg, you've got something on that?
Yeah, between me and you and Chris. So just to, as you recall from our first meeting in January, I'm assuming it was the meeting before that, we approved a fee schedule for 2023, including the new park service fee. There's been some discussion on that. We received some correspondence from former Mayor Herzig on that, and we've also received some internal feedback from park users, event organizers. Essentially, this was an effort, this came about, and I'll let you Blue jump here in a second, but this kind of came about from some complaints that we had received from various events with bathrooms, city bathrooms being unkept during the event, running out of toilet paper, paper towels, that sort of thing, or there not being enough portable toilets provided or in the right locations, some sort of combination there. We brought this up with the main event users, or about the large events that use Newell Park this year. We defined it as 250 or more people. And we're trying to come up with a solution where the city would rent portable toilets, a certain number of them, we can settle on 10, 2 of them being immediately accessible, locating them in the park in the areas where these events are typically held, so that they'd be there from June 1st through November, first week of November, the time when these events are occurring. So that they'd all share in those being there, they wouldn't have to make their own arrangements, and also the city can get these at what we think is a lower cost than what an event organizer would do.
Definitely a lower cost.
And some of the issues arise, some of their concerns about this is the added cost, because there's a fee associated, the city would charge the event organizer. The reason it's an added cost is because those events, certain events weren't providing any or enough portable toilets before, and that's kind of what we think helps create the issue. So I don't know if you want to jump in with any feedback you've been getting recently or since we've been on this.
We met with multiple users, especially the 8 major users of Newell Park on November 10th of last year. And we discussed these concerns. And we discussed how you decide the number of restrooms you need per the number of people you have. If you Google restrooms, portable restroom units, you are supposed to have a portable unit for every 50 people. That's not happening, not even close to that. And even including our park restrooms. And it's exhausting our park restrooms. And, as Greg said, people are flushing paper towels and anything else they can find down because of limited supplies and stuff, even when we're leaving extra supplies. So we could either mandate a number of restrooms that people have to rent, or we thought what would be the more fair thing to do is for us to rent, keeping in mind the bathrooms we already have in the park. We would rent 10 restrooms, 2 ADA compliant, 8 not, and place them, intersperse them, especially around the area of the caboose, because that's where these big users have their events, their food trucks, their activities are over there. Let's face it, most of the people who have to go to the restroom there are going to Demoski Field or the large pavilion. They're not using restrooms that are over at the pickleball courts, so those really aren't even considered. There's 2 there. They aren't using the restrooms that are at Field 4. There's 2 there. But events there are not walking all the way over to those restrooms. So we thought if we rented these restrooms, we could get a discounted rate. They would be there for the summer months when all these events are taking place. And we did the breakdown. We divided among our 8 major users what that would be. at the November meeting, they didn't like that because it was a big number. And it, in their opinion, and they were right, it wasn't completely fair. If I'm an event with 700, I'm having to pay the same as an event with 5,000. So we understood that. So we said we'd talk about it. We talked about it and we came back with an amount that was more fair. We asked them to give us numbers. Each of those 8 events gave us attendance numbers, or what they thought were attendance numbers. Nobody does a clicker in the park, it's hard to tell. But they gave us their estimates. And so we based what they would pay on the estimates that they bring in. And that's why you're looking at those fees that you guys have already, the council has already voted on. Those numbers are based on that.
So just make sure we're on the same page. I
Yes.
finally found my notes. So.
Any
we're talking
event over
250
250,
250 to 750 was gonna be 495?
yes,
Okay. And then 751 to 1250, 990?
correct.
Okay. So these are your final numbers?
Those are based on the restroom numbers and electricity usage. Now, those numbers will change. If the restrooms go up next year, it'll change. If our electricity use goes up, and it will, with all those outlets in the park, that'll change.
Does the Department of Health regulate how many porta johns are needed for an event?
They just have that recommendation on Google.
Okay, so that's what you meant by Google.
Yes,
This is Department of Health.
it's Department of Health, it's also on ADA compliancy and those kinds of things.
Thank you.
And remember that the restrooms at the large pavilion are not ADA compliant, which means Demoski Field.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, so this fee that we're talking about, we've already voted on it to implement it this year.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I guess I'm just wondering, for my report, what am I reporting here?
I think Gary was concerned about the.
Okay, so based on that, okay, so,
Cost to nonprofit organizations that we was what the logic was.
okay. And tell me again what, because I don't have my service fee, my fees list in front of me right now. Tell me again what the fees are going to be again?
So,
Thank you.
But I was impressed with your organization over there.
Sorry, I was making noise. I was just like, I know I have that.
one thing to keep in mind is that, like you said, these amounts for the different event sizes are based on what we estimated the rental cost to be for the year and divided by the number, it kind of is. There's one event we know of, Pride Fest, which no longer wants to be in the park, they would like to move to Main Street. So as those things change, if the city's still renting these toilets for the year, more of the cost gets borne by the city.
So we will have to absorb that fee, yeah.
So it's trying to be as equitable as we can within a structured fee system, whereas the alternative, which was the previous solution that we went by, although it wasn't strictly for us, was requiring the users to provide the correct number of bathrooms based on.
We're
event
actually
size.
saving them money doing it this way.
And the reason they think, it seems as though it's an additional cost because they weren't providing the right.
They weren't
number.
providing what they needed to provide in the past.
You could, if everyone thought it was more equitable, instead of doing a new fee structure, just be more stringent about making sure that they have the right number. But I don't know if I like that anymore.
I don't know if that's
What's
what's
the
the
better?
problem.
Yeah,
As
Yeah, how do you
our,
enforce it? I mean, if they don't do it, we go in and say, we're gonna shut your whole event down, and then it's
Well, you don't have
reversed.
to, you don't have to
It's-
do a permit, they don't agree to provide the right number, I think the right number, it really depends, we were talking before, it kind of depends on the event, where is it located, how many people do you expect, it's not a black and white thing. Like 1 year, they're approved, and they say they're gonna put them out there, and they're gonna take care of it, clean them throughout the event, and then we get a bunch of complaints, it's a reason for discussion with Parks and Rec Commission and Blue, ultimately the council, whether that permit gets renewed the next year.
I I think bottom line is we need to have portable units in and around that area of the caboose for these big events. Because another thing that a lot of these users, not all of them, but a lot of them don't look at, is what else is going on in the park. You know, a lot of them are having events when the Outlaws have a game. A lot of them are having events when the Outlaws are having a game, and there's a tournament, a baseball tournament happening on Field 6. And then there's a big event in the large pavilion. So all of a sudden, we're not just looking at their event and having restrooms, so they're just looking at their event. We're trying to look at what's going on in the park. And during this time period, a lot of events are going on in the park.
Lou, these prices that we've got, and forgive me if this has already been answered, but the prices that we have here, this is not including, the city's not paying any of additional fees on top of this to make sure the toilets are there. These are the fees for these big events, and that's covering the entire cost of having the 10 toilets for the season?
Yes, it's covering the restrooms and our electricity estimate from last year. We figured that in. Like I said, that estimate will go up next year.
What's the total cost that we're talking about to have 10 bathrooms?
$7,200.
I'm sorry?
7,200.
Yes,
We're paying $130 per unit for a month. Whereas if someone rented a unit for a weekend, they'd be paying $230 for one weekend. So we have a significant savings by the city renting the units.
And Chris, that includes maintenance on a regular basis?
That's correct.
that,
So
there
2
were
cleanings a week.
2 services a week,
2 a week?
2 a week. And that we got them to agree to that. They're servicing it after an event, and so if there's an event on the weekend, they're servicing it on Monday or Tuesday, and then they'll service again on Friday before the next weekend's events. So if they've sat there all week and been used, they'll be serviced again before the weekend event.
How much do these groups, what are they typically paying fees for their events again? Already on top of
They're
this?
paying a $100 application fee this year, and then depending on what they rent. If they rent a pavilion, they'll pay a pavilion fee. If they are renting the stage, they'll pay the stage fee, the bandstand stage fee. But to just use park space, $100 application fee.
Okay, and these 8 events, because I know some of them, I'm sure I know all of them if you reminded me, but how many of them actually charge people a fee for going to their event?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what they charge. They may charge their vendors that set up, I don't know. They probably do. I would guess they do. But I don't have any role in that.
Yeah, as far as attendees, people attending the event.
People attending are,
There's a
it's
race-
free.
There's a race that is included in this.
I don't think that there's any, unless they charge for, if they have like a laser tag and they might charge a fee for that, I don't know.
So one of the events is a race? We're talking which race are we
The
talking?
events are Pride Fest, Girls on the Run, which is a new event this year, Hometown Oneonta, 4th of July, Balloon Fest, the Soccer Club, Grand and Glorious Fall Fair, Harvest Party, and the Hot Cocoa Run.
I think these fees are gonna kill a couple of those events. I'll be honest. I'm sitting here and like, I've been going back and forth about this since the original email that somebody sent to us about this.
Right.
And I agree with, on one hand, passing costs on to some groups, but on the other hand, we are trying to make Oneonta a destination, and I know things like the Hot Cocoa Run, I mean, they're not there to make money. And to expect them to pay $500, I think is really something that they're gonna reconsider, probably moving the race somewhere else or not even having it. For $7,200 for the summer, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, why don't we just budget for this? I mean, we want Oneonta to be a destination, we want people to come here, especially in the warmer months, use our parks, and potentially think about, hey, we're living here. $7,200, I mean,
We cut 1.2, we had to use general fund reserves, $1.2 million to balance the budget after cutting down from $4 million.
I know.
Deficit. I mean, I know you know that, everyone knows, I don't need to say it, but I have to say it. This is why we're looking at when we're adding a service, let's try not to add services when we can't maintain the ones we have now. But I understand what you're saying, if you wanted to transfer the money from general fund reserves and just take care of it ourselves, that's an option, for sure.
I don't disagree with you because last thing I wanna do is not have people in the park. What's the sense of having a beautiful park and you don't have people there?
About
For the geese?
Hometown, 4th of July, they incur more just than the Portable John. I mean, I'm going through this and Brian kind of refreshed me of this, so I'm looking at all the costs that they go through. Theirs is substantial, right? So it's beyond just $100. They're looking at, they have EMS, police. There's a lot of,
I was just
Additional
referring to the
charges.
park fees.
well,
I
we're talking
don't know about
adding
those
now
fees.
another $1,500 for that event, aren't we? We're talking about what, dude? But now we're talking, having them pay another $1,500, right? Because that's an event of more than 1,500 people.
Yes.
Right, right.
One thing I'd like to add, and Lou and I have talked about this, and Greg, is some of the organizations that hold these events, some of them do a really good job of checking the bathrooms, some of them don't at all.
Right.
So I don't know if, changing the rules and making sure that they are checking the bathrooms might help, would help.
that's a good solid number, 7,200.
We're paying this year,
Yes,
7,200, and that takes care of all 8 events.
10. Oh yeah, 8 events.
8
yes.
events,
8
yes,
events.
correct.
Well, any number of events really, it's gonna be 10 or 5 months of,
Well, I meant that there's enough Porta Johns there, that we're not renting more because of an event. So it's
Well,
budget, $7,200 gets us all those events.
yeah.
I will say that the 4th of July does rent more. She's already told me they'll need more than that, more than 10. I think that they rented 15 in the past.
And I think they rent air conditioning units.
Yeah, they do have some of them. I mean, some of these events have their portable units donated to them.
Scott, you're being quiet over there.
Processing. But, so some of them are already supplying their own, whether they're paying for them, not paying for them.
The 4th of July event is amazing. They do a remarkable job.
So, if we can save them some money, which is what this is, if we get them at a better price, that's a positive. I understand the negative, but I'm also thinking we just had a person come in front of us wanting us to put $6,000 back in the budget because it got cut a few years ago, first night. I mean, at some point, we gotta kinda draw the line and say, hey, we want you here, but you gotta kinda help us out a little bit too. I mean, we can only ask just so much of our taxpayers to foot the bill. It's kind of the way I look at it. I mean, the little stuff starts adding up over a while. 7,200 here, 6,000 here, this here. We're taking a couple million, 1 million, 1.2 out of our reserves. We're cutting, going on the shoestrings budgets as it is. We're asking our fire, DPW, police, all of our departments to do more with less. I don't know how you ask them to do more with less and then say, hey, but we'll find a way to come up with this amount of money for this. That's I'm kind of like stuck. I mean, on one hand, I'd like to be able to provide it, but on the other hand, I'm sitting there going, at some point, where do we draw the line?
So I guess my question right now then is, we've already approved these fees. So what do we need, what are you looking for from this group today?
Well, there were questions raised by the community, including the event organizers, about, you know, whether they would continue to have their events there. Is this really what we want to do, to the point it made, you know, $7,200?
Well,
You know, we thought it was worth having a discussion,
okay.
knowing that people are gonna continue to have issues with it.
Yes.
Is it just the portage on that they have a cost, or a problem with the cost, or the other fees that I just listed out earlier? Are we good on
Well,
them?
the park service fee, which essentially is driven by the portage on costs, is a new fee. Everything else.
This is what was referred in the email.
Right, but is that the only, that's all I'm asking, is this the only cost that is a question? The rest of them are okay?
Well, this is the dollar amount that we were given. That was when the complaint was made to us directly, the dollar amount was essentially $500, if I remember right, and which corresponds to this. So, for that, at least that one event that they were talking about. So,
Right, but to Scott's point, and he's right, is that there's a lot of other costs that are involved when we push DPW, police, and fire out to the larger events. I'm willing to work with, you know, these fees. I mean, to your point, Dave, if $7,200 is not a lot in the scheme of things, I'd hate to lose our hometown 4th of July event, which brings in a lot of people into the community, for $1,500, right? Am I looking at that correctly? I mean, if they're good with all the other costs, I look at how much they're gonna spend on the other side of the sheet. It's substantial.
so this is only for events that bring in 250 or more people.
Yes, because we feel our restrooms can accommodate smaller events.
Do you charge for the smaller groups for, like, if I was gonna rent a big pavilion and I needed the bathrooms for my event, do I have to pay?
You're
For those.
charged for the pavilion that covers the bathroom.
So essentially, we're already charging then. For,
If they rent a pavilion, yes.
That's a private event though, it's not a public event.
Yeah, they're paying to reserve the space for their
Yeah.
exclusive use. The bathroom they could use if they just showed
Right.
up.
Since we have 5 minutes left here, I don't see the need in me putting my opinion out anymore. I know how you guys feel about it. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have had an opportunity to see it, and this is a no-win situation, clearly, we don't wanna lose any of these events, but we recognize we're trying to move costs that we would have to dip into our general fund over other folks. Unfortunately, this is where we're gonna be at for a long time in terms of how to deal with this, it's unfortunate. But I'm trying to find a kind of space between, and in my mind, I immediately went to those community initiative grants. Is there anything to stop any of these groups from basically applying to those community initiative grants? I think I'm calling the right thing, we've had some different names. A, B, do we have money left over from that annually that we can maybe put towards this? I think those grants support these types of events. Just trying to find a way to be able to thread that. And started looking over at you, Greg, but I don't know what how much we've used of that first year.
There's still money in there, I'm not, off the top of my head, aware of that exact
I know we kind of allocated, I think it was 25 for each year. Did we use that? I mean, is there something we could be able to use from unallocated money from last year? A, question. B, next question, could we also have these groups apply for that funding on their own? C, and I think there's a cap on how much we could use. Is there an organization that could apply for the 7,200 to cover that for all these events and basically support that? So a way to be able to pay for these without coming out of our own account or charging I mean, it's already, we already have that money, it's kind of already spent, if you will. I'm just trying to think of a way to kind of thread the needle here.
Is that a question for Judy?
Jenny.
I already recommended to one of those users that they apply for some money, grant money, to cover that cost.
Right, okay.
And they were going to do that, and I haven't heard anything differently from them.
Yep, okay.
Another thing just to keep in mind is we're talking about Woodward Park and how we're gonna pay for those projects over the years in Ewell Park and all. If you look at the master plan, there are
is there anything, can we table West End Ave parking and 5K race courses, or is there something that we have to get done in 2 minutes?
I think we,
Can we wait? That's we're gonna table it? Yeah, as long as it's okay with everybody else.
And then just
Yeah.
for our accounting is that we're gonna all look, staff, Dave made this up. This is in referencing to the,
Honorary.
signs, honorary signs. And that, he put this together for us. He just wants us to review it.
And I had two concerns brought to me by constituents. I will email you both, generally those concerns, and if we can put them on the agenda for the next, meeting. One of them had to do around speed limits and signage, so I thought that was kind of, important to this
Okay.
committee.
Okay, anything else?